Your mind is universal. It is God's mind. When you have discovered that fact, you become co-creator with God. Until you do discover it, God speaks to you through instinct. When you finally do discover it, all knowledge comes to you from that still, small, silent voice, which extends inspiration, beauty, intuition, rhythm, and all of the mind qualities you did not have until the dawn of consciousness began to awaken a realization of them in you. Realize, then, that your body consists solely of electric thoughts, and all electric thoughts are rings of visible electric motion, centered by the still, magnetic, invisible light of your mind. If you concentrate your mind thinking, the thought rings will become smaller and spin faster. If you relax by decentrating your thinking, the holes will become larger and rings will spin more slowly. If your thinking is unbalanced by emotional disturbances, or your actions reflect your unbalanced thought decisions, the tensions which result from such unbalance will cause every mind center, which controls the balance of those thought rings, to act as though they were off-center, and the spinning of the electric current around that eccentric center will be like a flywheel with its shaft spinning, with its shaft eccentrically placed. When you understand this, you will know why your body develops toxins which cause you various ills. See Figure 46, which further demonstrates that you cannot become off-center with your mind source. These diagrams tell you just where your mind is in relation to every one of the billions of cells which constitute your body. All of them have a central switchboard in your brain which sends messages of command to them. Remember always that a thought ring is a sliced section of a cell, small and large, of your body. No matter where you slice through your body or any body in nature, you will find that each section is a ring with a hole in it. The hole is where invisible mind is located. The ring is composed of electrically sensed motion that obeys the command of mind, which centers it. It can but obey, for it has no intelligence or energy of its own. Consider such a thought ring section in the cell of an ant. The ant cannot think for itself. The mind which created it reaches out with electrical messages, which we call instinct. All animal and vegetable life is controlled that way by their creator. They have a modicum of free will in accordance with the amount of intelligence which some forms of animal life attain. But vegetable and mineral life have no such power. They are entirely mind-controlled through their senses. Every particle of matter, in combination as mass, or single as a unit, is purposeful. Its movements are mind-directed. Cells composed of oxygen, hydrogen, and carbon, in combination with each other, are performing marvelous actions in your body. They are manufacturing adrenaline and dozens of other fluids by mind control. They are knitting bones and flesh together in accordance with marvelous patterns. They are digesting your food and transmuting it to blood. They group themselves into marvelous machines which pump, knit, weave, and perform many skills with many techniques. What man-made built machines do you know of that can build themselves, then operate themselves without mind motivation and mind control? You do not know of any, for that is an impossibility of nature. It is equally impossible for the cells of your body to build and operate themselves. Each one is a purposeful mechanism. It has to be created by mind power, just as you would have to create a typewriter to fulfill its purpose that way. That is why you must know where the intelligence and energy is which operates them. Look at figure 48 with this ideal in mind. Note in it that all that God is can be extended to the motion which manifests God. All knowledge, energy, inspiration, ideal, beauty, rhythm, intuition, and other mind qualities are within every thought ring of motion in all creation. Man is the only unit of creation which has yet arrived at that stage, and only a very small percentage of the human race has risen to that high state of unfolding in which man has become aware of his centering intelligence. The very large percentage of the human race thinks electrically with its outer senses instead of inwardly toward the inner mind. Man in the mass is aware of senses only. Such a word as inspiration has only a superficial meaning for him. Since thinking is purely electric, all sensations of the body are purely electric. One who senses electrically can acquire only what information of sensed effects that his senses reflect to him from objects of his observation. He is limited in his conclusions and decisions to what his senses tell him of bodies in motion. He can never acquire knowledge of cause that way. He can acquire knowledge only by thinking inwardly and thus talk to God direct. The relation of the electric current to mind thinking. We have diagrammed the relation and location of mind to matter. That diagram shows how messages are sent out to creating bodies electrically for long ages, before dawning intelligence makes bodies become aware of the meaning of those messages, or that they are from the divine source of all creation, which is within all things. We will now parallel this diagram with another to show that mind messages, which are sent to creating bodies from their magnetic source of universal intelligence, are identical with the nature of the electric current. Before entering into this comparison, figure 49 portrays, we wish to inject a new thought regarding the process God makes use of in the construction of his electrical body universe. Instead of using textbook language, we will use simple, homely phrases to emphasize our meaning. God creates matter by projecting very big electric rings of visible light around still points of his invisible magnetic light. By so doing, he creates big black cold holes in his bitterly cold space. In order to create bodies of solid matter in those cold holes, he must heat the holes to incandescence, and then freeze the incandescence by surrounding it with his universal basic cold to imprison it until it has fulfilled his purpose. He then uses his basic cold to compress series of 4 pairs of rings into spheres by squeezing the cold black holes out and letting the 4 pairs of compressed ring spheres of light in. This constitutes his entire generative or polarizing principle of creation, for the only things created are heat and motion. All effects in all creation are the product of heat and motion. Living things are the product of heat and motion, but living things must die. To die, they must re-give their heat back to the cold which created it, and they must re-give their motion back to the stillness from which it was extended. God's way of doing this is just the reverse of his generative method. He gradually lets the cold black holes return within the hot spheres by projecting rings in series of 4 from the equators of spheres until they entirely disappear into their basic, changeless cold. All matter thus begins to appear as rings of light around black holes, and finally disappears as rings of light around black holes. You can plainly see by this homely description that there is no process of nature which allows for material nuclei in its atoms. The nucleus for all atomic structure is the magnetic light of its creator's mind. Likewise, the energy for the construction of atoms is in that centering magnetic light. It is the invisible light which centers the visible light. It is the energy of God's omnipotence which centers its simulation of energy by motion. It is the ideal of God's knowing which is manifested by moving forms which image God's ideal. It is the beauty, the rhythm, the balance, and the ecstasy of God's thinking of His one ideal, of the giving and re-giving of His love to His creation, for manifesting His love in all creating things. You should plainly see by this time that the intent of creation is to dramatize the ideal of love by expressing it in action and reaction. Love is one ideal, the one ideal of creation. To express love, the ideal must be divided into separated halves. To fulfill love, the two halves must be united as one. Halves of one must be equal, therefore their actions and reactions must be equal and simultaneously created. The only action which can express love is the action of giving. The only equal and opposite of giving is re-giving. The one is divided. The two divisions simultaneously exist. If the action of giving extends from one, it equally and simultaneously extends from the other. If equal giving and re-giving of each half are simultaneously expressed, the product of that fulfillment is love. Can you not see, therefore, that the one great age-long lesson of life is to learn how to balance every transaction of life in such a manner that givings and re-givings between pairs of opposites are equal? That is all there is to learn, for that is all there is in nature. Creation consists of multiple electric wave units. In every cyclic unit of creation, the law of love is expressed to perfection, as demonstrated in one cycle of the electric current. Can you not see, also, that the reason why man's world is in such chaos is because man has hardly begun to learn that lesson of the eons? His givings are few, but his takings are many. His empires have been constructed upon his takings, which he is now losing, and will continue to lose, until he has balanced them with givings. Can you not see, therefore, that the one world of peace is far away into the long generations of learning that one simple lesson of rhythmic, balanced interchange in every transaction of man, as it is in nature? That law of man which reads, actions and reactions are equal and opposite, should be rewritten as follows to conform to nature. Equal and opposite actions and reactions are simultaneously created and sequentially repeated. In exemplification of this law, we urge a careful study of Figure 53, 54, 55, 56, and 57. Every transaction in nature is repeated in each of these examples, whether it be the casting of a pebble or the creation of a sun. In an entire solar system, its balanced transactions are so perfectly in keeping with the law of love that one can calculate to a split second the exact time and position of any planet 1,000 years from now. Conformity with that one law is the only way that mankind can ever find peace, happiness, and prosperity in a unified world. How long shall it be before you yourself shall find it? In that is the answer to world unity, for you are the seed of the world. What you become, the world becomes from your givings. We exemplify the mind nuclear principle. So radically different a conception of atomic structure demands much exemplification to replace the old with the new. For this reason, we must cite many examples to demonstrate that every creating, growing, living, and dying thing in nature is just a multiplicity of slow and fast-moving light rings surrounding dark holes of low electric potential, centered by a zero point of absolute stillness and unlimited mind potential. The new concept is a challenge to the old, which must be met by such convincing proof that the new concept is undebatable. Let us preface the following examples by these textbook statements of facts known to science. Number 1. An electric current sent through a wire is confined to its surface. There is no current at its center. Quoted in essence from Tesla, Faraday, Pupin, Milka, Ken, and others. Number 2. Living cells show a difference in electrical potential between their interior and the surrounding medium. Dr. Lewis M. Katz, University of Chicago. Figure 49 demonstrates this fact in an electric current. To emulate a section of a living cell, we will put a salt solution within a ring of conductive material. By placing 2 insulated wires with barred electrodes close together in the center of that ring and connecting the wires with batteries, we emulate the charged condition of the living body which the cell is a part of. By turning on the current, it will be found that the spot between the 2 electrodes is of zero potential, and that many lines of radiation extend from that center and cause a moving electric current to spin around the zero Fulcrum center where the ring is located. Not only that, but an electrode placed in contact with the ring will convey current away from it. This effect of electric current extending from a still center to convey its power to the ring and other outside conducive matter is identical with the mental example quoted in Figure 48. Anyone who may question this fact may not only prove it by this simple experiment, but can also move the 2 electrodes away from the center of the rim so that their centering zero occupies an eccentric position, as the human heart does in relation to the chest, and as the zero's center of the heart itself is eccentrically placed in relation to its mass. A different wave pattern will result, but the electric qualities will remain the same. There is always a point of stillness which centers the birth point of any action. Motion spins around that still point, but there is no motion at that center. Consider your body itself and every part of your body, even to its last microscopic cell. Every part of it is a moving ring in section which spins around a hole centered by stillness. Now consider every part of your body one at a time. Every horizontal section cut through your head is a ring of flesh and bone around a centering hole where the magnetic light of your mind is located. The space between is filled with a material quite unlike the flesh of your body. That material is the broadcasting and receiving station for conveying messages to every last microscopic part of your body. Consider your spinal cord. It also is a ring in every tubular section of it, which is not only centered by a hole for itself, but is confined in a ring of bone, which is your spinal column. Both of these are shafts made up of rings, but it must be remembered that every shaft in the body, as well as every artery and vein tube, is but a continuous extension of rings. Even the center itself is a continuous shaft of zero electrical potential, surrounded by thought rings of varying potential. The center itself is omni-magnetic potential, for that point is where you sit with God as one. Your heart is an electric thought ring of motion centered by a hole where your invisible mind is located. From that center it sends its complex messages out to the very wonderful mechanism which your heart is, to command its every part to function true to its purpose. Your lungs and your chest are rings of thought recordings which are likewise centered by 4 holes, for the carrying of 4 different qualities of messages from your mind to the thought rings which compose your whole body. We will refer to these again in this chapter. Now examine your fingers and toes, your arms and legs. Each of these are centered by 0 potential holes, around which are rings of bone and flesh of varied potential. Before completing our brief analysis of mind relation to the human body, let us step out into the forest and cut practically any growing flower, stem, shrub, sapling, or tree. All of them are rings in sections of either tubes or seemingly solid shafts. Even the leaf of the tree is centered by a tube from which countless tubes extend to center the countless millions of thought rings being created by the magnetic light which centers every one of them. If you cut a section of a newborn oak, you will find that it is tube-centered, but if you cut a section of an old oak, you will find that it has seemingly squeezed the whole out to attain density in accordance with the same principle of compression which gives density to a sun. Examine it, however, and you will see a series of rings surrounding its center. If you now examine the chemical elements such as oxygen, fluorine, helium, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, sodium, or potassium, you will find that their nuclei consist of varying-sized holes, surrounded by rings of varying sizes and numbers. Helium has 4 rings, with a very large hole within them. Helium divides into 4 pairs and becomes a solid sphere, which has squeezed the hole outside of it. Fluorine and lithium have 1 ring, with the centering hole smaller than helium. Oxygen and beryllium have 2 rings with still smaller holes. Nitrogen and boron have 3 rings with almost no holes. These male and female equal pairs unite in marriage and become 2 hemispheres, the red and blue halves being divided by an equator. Chemists and physicists have recognized something of this mathematical orderliness and have given it the name of valence. They say that oxygen has a valence of 2, carbon 4, etc., etc., and they balance and vary their mixtures in the ratio of valence by putting 2 atoms, which have a valence of 2, with one which has a valence of 4, to equalize their potentials. This they have always done, but their textbooks give no adequate explanation for doing so. The real reason is that spinning rings which get closer to their mind centers in the mind nucleus of every atom gain more and more power in the ratio of that closeness. Before returning to the mind and body relation in man, we must make it clear to you that the chemical elements must be considered in a very different way than man is considered. All have a mind and body relation, but minerals and gases constitute the first stage of creation only. They exist as compressed matter before water is created by combination with two of them, and air by a combination of another two. The next stage is a combination of these elements with water and air to create the vegetable kingdom. The simplicity of the mineral kingdom is then complexed by the addition of water and air, and more conduits are arranged in these combinations for the placement within its creation for the zero centers of mind control. The vegetable kingdom has very little free will, choice of decision regarding its welfare or destiny. It has some, however. Next in order of complex combinations is the animal kingdom. This third stage includes both mineral and vegetable matter in combination with water. The animal body is a complex pattern of variously arranged mineral and vegetable life, so must continually be replenished with all three stages of creation as its various parts die. For this reason, very much more space is given to the body for mind control and for the creation of very different forms of matter of high conductivity to carry the messages concerned in body manufacture and body survival. Directional messages such as instinct have a very different reflex toward matter than those which may be called automatic reflexes, which are very much more keen in animal than in vegetable life. The fourth and last stage is the human. Man's body is also a combination of all three stages, but mind awareness only begins in the human stage. The animal has much intelligence, but it is not aware of it as a quality within him. And I will begin again in the next session.